But I think when you commit to having space and time around you that is built for your next stage, you grow into it far more quickly than you can possibly imagine. Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jody.
I'm Elliot.
And in today's story that Elliot tells, we get into some really great conversations about how committed you are to what you want and if the things around you are built for what's next or if they're built for kind of what was before and if that's in the way. So really cool stuff.
Here we go. So here's my story. I sent out an email to a number of my contractor clients just recently asking them to give me some bids on reconfiguring a portion of my space. And this was after I had plans drawn up by an interior designer. And the reason I'm reconfiguring part of the space is because I want to take two of our interior offices, combine them, paint green screens on each side, and I want to turn that new reconfigured area into a studio of sorts where we can,
Ooh.
I know, where we can do the podcast and we can, or I can record the online courses that I want to be doing. And I envision
this is exciting
coming out
news.
2020. Yeah, I'm really pretty excited about it. And it's taken me a long time to do it. And in figuring out how I wanted to reconfigure the space, what occurred to me, and the reason I'm mentioning it here, is that the given that you have when designing your office space, and we moved in here at the end of May of 2016, so 3.5 years ago or so. The given is that you design your space to accommodate what you've always done, what got you there.
Mm-hmm.
And so
because when you're moving it, it's like, what spaces do you need? What are you...
Right. And so obviously we designed the space to be not primarily, but 100% of a law firm.
A law firm?
That's what we do. So we had our offices, we had the places for the secretaries and support staff, and we had a couple conference rooms. And
for doing law stuff.
Right. Serious, you furrow your brow when you say that, serious law stuff. And in fact, for all of those, and I mean, well, all of those who have taken the tour of SHMS Global that we give regularly, to all of those people, you will know that the studio from which we broadcast and record our podcast was really intended to be the second conference room for doing law stuff.
Yes. As is evidenced by the enormous clock on the wall.
There's an enormous clock,
like
which is always wrong, by the way. But and we have a television on one wall, which has never ever been used.
It is a very lawyery looking.
It's very lawyerly looking. Yeah. And we're recording this at a conference table. It's not, I don't know what a podcast table necessarily looks like, but it doesn't look like this.
Right.
So the things that I really want and envision that I'll focus on in the next couple years, online courses, the podcast, certain ways to increase our reach beyond just people coming in and sitting in the offices, et cetera, are things that are by necessity shoved into the unused corners of my law firm space. And so
I got to tell you, you were not like piquing my interest on this story. I'm like, oh my God, this very rarely does Elliot tell a boring story, but I'm not sure where he's going with this. And now I am suddenly super interested.
Yeah, I just see that, first it's a function of time because you're always looking back. You're looking into the past when you design space. And then it is literally a function of space. All right, well, the things I want to do don't quite fit. So let's find some unused, dusty corner and I can fit that in. And I actually decided, and I was really excited about this, to make the decision to reconfigure the space for looking forward, to figure out what I really wanted to make time for, what I really wanted to put my effort into, and then figure out how I can make the space work for that. Prospective rather than reactive or retrospective. And
And how interesting that that's not a small thing. I mean, you're actually looking at renovating. You're tearing down walls, like building,
renovating, and
do you mean the two offices out by where your office are?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's not a small amount of construction. I mean, it's not like
no, it's
ripping out structural walls, but it's
soundproofing, and it's combining offices, ripping out walls, reconfiguring some things. But there are two aspects of it. One is simply a financial issue and design issue. And I think that's the smaller one. The real issue is the actual commitment to make that, you know what, I'm going to actually build something in service of what I want to do. I'm not going to fit it in my calendar, and I'm not just going to try and fit it in the existing corners of my current space. I'm going to commit.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I did all this stuff and then went, you know what, I don't really want to do this podcast thing anymore. I don't really want to do these online courses or videos anymore. There's nothing much that I could use that space for. This soundproof, green screened studio space where you have to make lighting adjustments, and it's not just the fluorescence and things like that. But it's a real commitment to what I see going forward.
It's funny, literally seconds before you said the word, I was writing down the sentence, how committed am I to what I want, like what I want next, even more specifically. And so a couple of things that I do want to point out. I do think there are stages of commitment that make sense. Like when you're first dabbling around with a thing, you don't necessarily need to, like when I first started playing guitar, I didn't go out and buy the $1,500 guitar.
And Paul Reed or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't go out and buy the fanciest, schmanciest guitar because I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to stick with it. And so actually, I didn't even buy a guitar. There's this guitar in my family that is sort of like the try it out guitar, and it gets passed around. I had it for a number of years. Then actually somebody took it back for a number of years, and then I got it back for another couple of years. Didn't really do a lot with it. So super glad I didn't buy one. And then eventually I was like, oh, okay, I'm a little more committed. I'm going to buy a guitar. And I bought a guitar. And then I bought a second one, but that's not not the point of the story. No. Actually, you know what? Actually, it is a tiny bit, because what I noticed was I picked up John's guitar, and John has a Taylor, and Taylors and Martins are good guitars, really good guitars. And mine was fine, but I picked up his guitar one time and I was playing it, and I actually discovered that I was better than I thought I was, because on a really good guitar, I sounded better than I ever will on my inexpensive guitar. That was my first guitar I bought. So in that moment, I felt ready to commit to a next level, because I could actually play well enough that you could hear the difference in the two guitars. So, but coming back to, it's interesting. When I first came here to record with you, I was kind of impressed that you had actually even committed this room, your second conference room, because you don't have 3 conference rooms. If that one's busy, there's no second place to go that's not this room. And it's pretty committed to being a podcast room.
You can't hide it, really.
No. I mean, there's what are these things, like the boom mic things, like stretching. You could push them out of the way, but you wouldn't bring your fanciest clients in here because it looks like you're using the room for something else. Anyway.
The one time I did bring a client in here, they were very worried that I was recording their confidential conversations. Which wouldn't be subtle. It's not like I have a small mic in the corner. I've got these 3 mics all over the place. Anyway.
So I was actually impressed that you had committed this room even temporarily. I mean, because I know there are a lot of people who do podcasts that use their closet or, whatever, and they have their stuff and they have to pull it out and then put it back every time. And so that was a level of commitment. And as the online things you've been doing and the podcast become more and more substantial, like you're ready for that next level of commitment. So I think there's that aspect of like staged commitment. But I love what this piece, and I don't know if this was your whole point, but this is the part that really piqued my interest about how often we struggle with a thing because we are shoving it into the corners, either space-wise or time-wise or energy-wise, where it's getting like the thing that's, I notice this pattern with me sometimes where, and we talked about this a few months ago, actually. I think we might have even mentioned it in an episode where, the podcast is really important to me. And there was a while there where it was getting the last dregs of my attention any given week. I do everything else, then I'd work on the podcast. Yeah. And that's so backwards to, occasionally I do this little thing for myself where I make the list of things that I really want more of or that I really care about. And then I just check in with like where on that, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much of my time and energy and focus does it get? And a lot of times it's kind of embarrassing to admit, but there's been a number of times where the things I care or say I care most about are getting the least amount of my time and commitment.
Yeah. And I want to talk about, because you mentioned what I think is a really important point. You talked about the two levels of commitment, or the two stages of commitment. And I think there's value in looking at both of them. So I have a friend who decided that he really wanted to do a lot more public speaking. And in order to do public speaking, he had to practice. Well, when he embarked on this, he actually, in his basement, and I saw it, he built a small stage.
Whoa.
So now it was more time than real money. I mean, it doesn't look anything fancy, but he wanted to be able to have a designated practice space where he would actually go and stand, and he could move on the stage the way he would move during a presentation. And that was his first literal and figurative stage of commitment, because he
I see what you did
felt,
there.
Yeah, he felt that if he didn't do that, it wouldn't be a constant reminder for him to really get started. It wouldn't spur him on. It was almost symbolic in a way of his commitment to go forward. Now, similarly, when you walked into this room, not only did I reserve the space, but I did have some equipment. I had some, and it was more than just, a lot of people, when they start podcasts, they've got a Bluetooth Yeti microphone or something.
Which is perfectly fine. No, but you had committed.
I had real equipment.
Yeah.
And it was much more than I needed at that point. But for me, I needed to almost tell myself that this is a real thing. I'm not going to turn back. And so, just like my friend in building the stage, that was the first part of his commitment. This is a real thing that I'm going to do. I'm not going to give myself the luxury of easily saying it was a passing fancy and just turn away from it. But then you have the second stage, when you really see that the thing has legs, like you are working it, you are doing it. We started this podcast, and we've been running it for a while, and it's grown, and it's become part of both of our lives and professional existence, et cetera. And so then I started to look at, well, wait a minute, where we were when we started is not where I think that we're going to be next year. And I want to accommodate that. I want to give priority to this.
You said something so profound. It just, like, I almost got, like, weirdly teary about it. But you said it was much more than I needed at the time. And it was an aha that I don't think I've ever, I mean, I know that I have done this over the years, and I've witnessed it happen in a number of ways, but I know it's something I've been cognizant of, how important it was in the development of a thing, but I have never used it intentionally necessarily, like the way when you said it just then made a couple of things click for me. But I have, I run roundtables for business owners, and it's one of the ways that I sort of solve the "it shouldn't be lonely at the top" puzzle. And it's funny, I've had people say, like, well, I don't know if I'm really at the stage for that. At this point, they've got a couple of employees or whatever. I don't know if I need that right now. I'm like, let me tell you something. I joined a Vistage group, which is a different version of what I do. I joined a Vistage group, and I remember it was $375 a month. And I can tell you right now that there were a number of months where that was significantly more than I had billed. And I was still COO of the architecture firm. But I joined that because I knew if I was ever going to make the leap, I needed to be in the space with other consultants who were, like, doing what I wanted to be doing. I needed more. I kind of had to build the space around me with more than I needed at the moment in order to have enough space to grow and do what I needed to do. And as you were telling the story, it reminds me, I don't know if this is true or not. Like, I wonder if hermit crabs stick with me.
Oh, this is interesting. Keep going with hermit crabs.
I don't know a lot about hermit crabs, but I'm really curious. I wonder if, do they wear their current shell until they are, like, bursting at the seams, or do they wear it until it's just, like a little bit snug? And I know they don't just get, their next shell is not just enough bigger. Like, they get a pretty sizably larger shell, and then they grow into it. And the other place that I saw this happen the most amazingly that I ever had was when this architecture firm that I was with, we were in the same space for the first probably like 5 years that I was there. And we had grown a fair amount, but we kind of stagnated at like 17, 18 people. And, as an architecture firm, it's also important what your space looks like, how it feels.
You would
Because,
think,
people
yes.
come in and the front part of our office was fine, but the rest of it we weren't super proud of. It was a little botched, it was like chopped up and whatnot. And so we moved to the Steve building and had that whole half section of the upper floor of the Steve building, which is just a cool old industrial space. And we really made it ours. And we planned to grow by like 6 or 7 people. We thought, well, we won't grow that much in the 4 or 5 years. We grew in like the first year. I was having to find like auxiliary office space for people because we blew through the desks. We blew through all the extra spaces. I think within a year we were like over 30. And it's not because of the space per se, but I think when you commit to having space and time around you that is built for your next stage, you grow into it far more quickly than you can possibly imagine.
No, I think that's really true. And first, I would appreciate it if our podcast community could weigh in on their thoughts on when hermit crabs begin looking around for shells, because I think that's an important issue. But I do think that there's something to creating something not for right now, not for your present needs, but that you would grow into, that represents your commitment not only to do this thing, but to make it work and to grow it and to have it evolve. And one of my friends, Andrew Davis, talks about pricing. He says, if you're getting booked to speak, if you get booked right now, you're not going to be speaking until March or April or May of next year because you're going to get booked so far in advance. So don't give them the pricing that you'd have for right now. If you were giving your talk in November, you give them the pricing for what it's going to be in March or April or May.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And so I think this goes to the space renovation goes to a lot of things, not just what are we going to use it for now, but what can I see that will grow into down the road, my priorities. And that goes to pricing. It goes to planning because now we're in the fourth quarter. So looking ahead, what do I really want 2020, 2021 to look like? And then how is that going to be reflected in everything, including my physical environment? Because I think that manifests where your commitment level lies. In other words, what changes do I need to make now to accommodate what I want to be spending my time, money, and effort on in the next year or 2 years or 3 years?
Yeah, because it's interesting. As you were saying that, I think some of it is like ever so slightly woo-woo-ish, but some of it's also just the signals you send yourself. But there is something really interesting about if, like, sort of what you're telling the universe and what you're telling yourself, if the thing that you are most passionate about is either literally or figuratively shoved into a corner. And, and that's not to say that, I mean, trust me, I'm like the queen of scrappy resourcefulness of like making something out of not a lot of resources. So what I don't want this to be confused of like, well, if you're not willing to mortgage the house to renovate a thing, like this isn't about dollars investment. It's as much about time as anything else, I think. I have often noticed either with business things or especially with family things or health things or kid things, I have hysterically noticed that a lot of times when I'm frustrated that like something isn't happening the way I want it to, I'm like, oh, that's because I'm literally giving it zero amount of my time. I'm not like, why are, I wish the house was decluttered or I wish the kids were, more interested in XYZ. I'm like, you're investing no time or energy into that thing. As if somehow like your wishes and wants just like drop in from the skies. Like,
yeah, I mean, like, so an example with the podcast is you and I have talked a number of times about how, we really should do some video. We've joked around about recording, and sometimes our listeners know that we'll say, if you could see us right now, I'm making air quotes, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that, or whatever. And we've talked about it, and we've been in podcast forums, and we know that people do that. There's some interest in seeing it. But then I look around here and I was like, well, okay, the light is fluorescent. The way we sit in here, because it's a conference table, it's not a podcast table, we'd only be in profile. The walls are such that the colors do us no favors whatsoever.
We've taken pictures in here. It's a terrible thing.
It's not good. It looks like an old Victorian washed out type thing.
Really brings out the yellow in our skin.
Yes, it does. The tallow. So,
can I turn up the jaundice on mine, please? Thank you.
Exactly. So, we start looking at, well, what do we really want to do? And why haven't we done it? Well, one of the reasons in that particular endeavor we haven't done it is because we're not built to evolve into that particular avenue where we both know that we want to go. Mm-hmm. And it kind of struck me recently, and I was like, oh yeah, I should look at that. I was kind of waiting, Jody and I should really do video. We should really do video. I was ignoring the other obstacles, and we never did. And then I figured, you know what? Why don't I actually make it a priority that it's easy and appealing and all that stuff for us to evolve the way we want to?
Right.
Well, that would entail effort, and that's what I had to do.
Yeah, well, it doesn't always, that's the interesting thing. So one of the things I did when I got my second guitar was I put my first guitar in my room on the stand, like right by my bed. And so now I pick it up and play 5-10 minutes here and there. Like I actually use it. Whereas it's such a lame thing. It takes all of like 9 seconds to get it out of the case. But because of that, I just literally don't even think about it. And so it's now right there. It removes the barriers. Like it facilitates doing the thing that I want to do. And in our case, like, let's do video. Well, but the lighting in here is really bad. And where do we put the camera? And so that I love the concept of these sort of deciding points where, I want to do this thing, but ... So then rather than feeling like I often say this in facilitations, like there are tons of like yes, buts in the world. And yes, you can make them yes, ands, whatever. But let's say there's a yes, but if you put a period at the end of that sentence and then the conversation stops there, you're just stagnating. Yeah. Whereas if you focus your attention then say, yes, but we have ... I'm like, great, that's the next problem to solve. So if you focus your attention on that, what comes after the ... of like, oh, I'd love to do that, but ... Say, great, here's my next problem. So like eliminating the barriers, eliminating the things that are in the way or focusing your attention there. It's funny, like sometimes it makes you confront the fact that you don't actually want the thing, to be honest. Like
right.
If we have all the barriers removed and we don't do it or we don't like how it feels then you know what, that's also good to say like, wow, I really thought I wanted that thing and now I am quite certain that I do not. But once you remove them, sometimes the thing just gets really easy then and then you cascade on forward. So I really love this concept of kind of scanning your environment for how committed I am to the things that I want. And not only that, but is my space and my time set up for what I want next? Or is it just like a moderately modified version of what I had before?
Yeah. And so to follow on with what you said, for so long in doing this podcast, I was thinking, I want to do video. Video is a great idea. Yes, but, and I let it hang there. And what I finally decided to do was add on to the end, so I will... ... And that was, I'm going to change the space.
Yay.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
You
can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us. Which is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.